very recently, the US Copyright Office came out with some commentary on generative AI tools. And the conclusion is essentially something that's going to surprise a lot of people in the market. If you're using generative AI tools today to create content, articles, blog posts, books, images, whatever, according to the US Copyright Office, it sure seems like you do not own that content. That means that anyone can reproduce that content that has been AI created without your permission and create derivative works from it, display it, perform it, and sell it. So this happened, a few days ago. The Copyright Office is launching an initiative to examine copyright law and policy issues raised by AI, including how the scope of copyright actually works with these AI tools that can generate content. The Copyright Office said, quote, "The initiative is in direct response to the recent striking advances in generative AI technologies and their rapidly growing use by individuals and businesses." And they go on to mention they've gotten many, many requests from Congress and members of the public to examine the issues around copyright. Um, so they actually issued updated registration guidance that has an immediate effect on your ability to protect your original work. So a few really quick takeaways here, and then Paul, I want you to kind of unpack this for us, is that they lean very heavily on talking about the fact it's well established that copyright can only protect material that is the product of human creativity. So they use the term author, which is in both the Constitution and the Copyright Act, and say that that term excludes non-humans, i.e., AI cannot own it, it cannot be used to defend copyright if the artificial intelligence created the work itself. And they go on to talk about if a work's traditional elements of authorship were produced by a machine, it lacks human authorship. The office will not register it. So, for example, when AI technology receives a prompt from a human solely and produces the kind of complex content we just talked about, they are saying that this is not going to be protected by copyright for you or your business. So I want to get into some of the nuances here, Paul, because the way we're interpreting this, your kind of takeaway here was you need to talk to your IP attorneys and start really seriously thinking about this topic because it seems like a really big deal. Do we have that right?
Yeah, so the way this sort of snowballed for us was Sunday morning. So it was yesterday when I'm recording this, I saw an AI ethicist I follow tweeted something about this. And so I kind of start like following the pattern. Where did their tweet come from? And I land on the March 16th announcement about this new AI initiative from the Copyright Office. And in like the second or third paragraph, it says we've also updated our guidelines for submission of copyrights. So the significance of the copyright, if you're not familiar with like US copyright law, is that you have ownership of something. So if you create a song or a poem or an article or a blog post or a video or an image or whatever it is, once you create it and it's in a fixed space, so you release it somewhere, you put it out into the world, you technically own it, but you want to submit those things to the Copyright Office for like legal protection. So
Mhm.
if someone steals your stuff, you have to then prove that you had published it at this time. What you do is like once you create something, like let's say we create our courses or I create a new presentation and I want legal protection from it so nobody steals that idea from us, that knowledge, that intellectual property from us. I go to my IP attorney, who we use all the time, and I say, here you go, here's like 17 new courses, do your thing. Well, we got back from them in the fall, or I guess this was December. Well, would you have any AI generated image in this deck? The Copyright Office wants to know. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's like 3 images. Like you can't copyright the course because of 3 images. And it was like this gray area. So I've been aware that this was an issue for months and have thought about this. But by Sunday morning, I go to like just put something quick on LinkedIn, like, hey, FYI, the Copyright Office is looking at this. But once I dug into the updated guidance, I realized, oh no, this is like a major deal because I don't know of a single AI writing tool company that has that I have seen a point of view on this on, like any knowledge or information about it. Then I started thinking about all the recent major breakthroughs in generative AI that we just talked about. and how people are using GPT-4 to write entire articles, which it is capable of, or they're generating images and they're, using those and all their collateral and everything. And what it became very clear when you read that guidance is you have no ownership of it. So if I publish, like there was a big, was it Reid Hoffman that just published a book
Yeah.
using, go build a course on it. Like Reid has no ownership of that thing he just created. What they're basically saying is if you submit 1,000-word article or a 50,000-word book manuscript, so we have like the copyright on our book, basically anything that was generated by AI, you cannot claim a copyright on. Now you can get a copyright on the other stuff that was yours, the original work from you, but a text prompt doesn't count. So like if you gave a text prompt and it gave an output, you have no ownership of it. So I know people who are publishing blog posts using GPT-4, like
Yeah.
they're working on plans to release a whole bunch of content. Anybody can take it from them and they can't do anything about it. Because what's going to happen is if you try and litigate, so if you try and stop someone from stealing it, the Copyright Office will come to you and say, okay, prove that a human did this. And they're going to want proof. They're going to want to know what prompts you use, what was the output of the prompts. And so now again, it's not like they can do this. They don't have the staffing to do this for every single instance of copyright infringement. But this is where they're going to have to go, is they're going to have to figure out how do we scale the oversight that is going to be needed to prevent this from happening. So I mean, as Sunday went on, after I posted the original thing on LinkedIn, I started realizing, oh my God, wait, this may actually be a much bigger thing than I was originally thinking it was. And because you realized it's immediate. Like if you wanted to submit something right now that AI generated, or if you're putting a copyright, here's a practical example. Everybody has like, go to the website, go to their blog, at the bottom, copyright 2023, Marketing AI Institute, whatever.
Hmm.
So you're claiming a copyright on everything you're publishing, even if you haven't submitted it to the Copyright Office yet. If AI generated that content, you don't actually have a copyright on it. So if you're a big healthcare company and you're using AI to like write content, another healthcare company could take your content. You can't do anything about it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the implications are actually huge. And so I started thinking by last night, like, wait a second, this could actually be a major, major hindrance on the use of generative AI, especially for enterprises, because there's no way people that are big enough to have a legal team are going to allow this. And so I could see the pushback from the tech companies like, oh, whatever, law just hasn't caught up. Well, okay, but it's still the law. Like you don't get to change the law because you built really cool technology.
Hmm.
So I could see a lot of these software companies just feeling like this is just the government not catching up. And I could sort of hear that argument, but it's the law and it's not going to catch up for a while. So you're going to have to live within the confines of this. And that just changes the way these tools are used, I think. And nobody's talking about this. Like, it's wild to me that I can't, now that I'm thinking about it, like how do you raise all the money these companies have raised without the VCs saying, are there any copyright like barriers to this? Like is this actually going to get shut down because we can't actually generate and publish the stuff from these things?
And so I think it's important to give even more context there for the audience. People have been talking about, okay, what are some of the copyright issues around how some of the models themselves are trained? Vendors have talked about, okay, we hear and very much respect concerns around, say, plagiarism, and there's plenty of messaging about how it's creating original content. But the copyright element is a whole different animal, especially perhaps for some of the companies that you mentioned that don't typically fall into what we might call the Silicon Valley move fast and break things perspective,
Yes.
right? Plenty of companies do that. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just is. But in our past lives, we were agency professionals working with hundreds of different types of companies, both big and small, very slow enterprises and bureaucratic organizations and very fast moving startups. There is at least a significant portion of our former clients where this, I could tell you, would immediately be the number one cause for
Shut
concern
it down.
about, yeah, yeah,
Generative AI would be shutting down right now. I agree with you 100%. Like we work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, highly regulated industries. If legal knew this, it's done. Like there's a meeting happening in conference rooms right now. How are we using generative AI? Because yes, everything we've talked about today about the use of generative AI has been more on the ethical side and it's not plagiarism. Okay, you deal with that. We haven't publicly talked about this as a major issue, and I think it might be the issue. like, um, because yeah, it's like if you're gonna it starts to impact your staffing, your content strategy. So just because you can create content and publish it with these tools doesn't mean you should from an ethical standpoint and from a principle standpoint, but it might be that you're not actually allowed
Yep.
because you can't copyright the stuff. And that's where the legal teams are going to get involved. And we are not attorneys. Like I took a business law class and I feel like I've got a master's degree in intellectual property the last 20 years as a business owner. But we are not giving you legal advice. I'm saying talk to your legal teams before you go scale the use of content and video generation and image generation, all these things. Make sure you have the hard conversation right now before you start making staffing decisions based on this and
Mm.
tech stack decisions. Like we're at the point where we can kind of like rewind a little bit and be logical about where we go from here. But 3, 6, 12 months from now, you're going to have made some decisions around scale that are going to be really hard to wind back. And so I think this needs to, like you said, it needs to become like a top of the list priority item to be thinking about. And like, give you an example, another place this rolls in, speaking of our agency, the past agency,
Mhm.
we worked under work for hire agreements. So if a client came to us in the contract, it was a work for hire agreement, which means we're relinquishing the copyright to what we create. You are paying us. We will create this ebook or this course or this webinar or this video script or whatever it is. We're creating it for you. You own the copyright. What this means is if you're hiring an agency or an outside freelancer to create something for and they use AI to create it and don't tell you, you actually don't have the copyright you thought you had. You have no protection of the output. So the trickle down of this is massive. And again, if agencies were planning on scaling up using generative AI to get their services going, this again, if I was still the CEO of an agency, I'd be like, oh crap, like I didn't even think about this. And I would be revisiting what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? And I would be on a call with my IP attorney right now.
So obviously, this is still hot off the presses. We are not giving out legal advice and we're still figuring out our guidance and our perspective on this. But do you have any thoughts around what impact this will have on writers and marketers in terms of the use cases that they're looking at for these tools? We're all vetting
Yeah.
AI technology that can do everything from write to create audio to create video. How do we have to change how we're doing our work as an individual kind of in the trenches as a creator, marketer, or a writer?
The assumption a lot of people seem to make about AI writing tools is that they just write content, articles, blog posts, emails, like it writes. The reality is language models can be used for a lot of different purposes, like content summarization, where it's taking your original work, the human generated original work, and creating a summary of it. Again, not an attorney, but that seems safe to me. The original authorship comes from the human, and the machine is there to assist in the summarization. The same goes for transcription. Our podcast is a great example. You and I are having this conversation. All of these ideas are our intellectual property. They're covered under copyright under the Marketing AI Institute. When we transcribe it, it's just the machine transcribing the original authored words. Us putting it out fixes it in the world. So it's owned and fixed. Those are the two criteria of copyright. So transcription and summarization, those seem very safe to me. They seem like really logical use cases. I also look at things where the copyright doesn't really matter. So if I'm sending sales emails or like
Right.
marketing emails, like I'm not submitting those to my IP attorney to copyright every sales email that goes out. So I could see that probably being safe. So I think what needs to happen, and this is where like when I'm thinking about our AI for Writers Summit next week, like where I'm kind of going with my keynote now, which I now have 10 days to create. Um, I'm trying to think through like what guidance we can offer people of what appears to be safe. Again, still consult with your legal team, but like these seem to be the safe use cases. And again, if I was an AI writing tool SaaS company, I would do the exact same thing because you may be guiding your customers to use your tools in a way that they're not legally going to be allowed to use them. So I may steer into the other use cases where it is truly ideation and outlining and like these things that seem real safe. And I think they're walking a fine line because everyone I see is like, well, the human's got to be in the loop. It's just a writing assistant tool. And yet they're teaching them, go ahead and write the 600-word blog post and then just edit it.
Right.
It's not clear to me that that's going to get a copyright. Like, it doesn't seem, I think they need to talk to their legal teams as well to get better guidance for their customers. And they need to do it fast because the market is going to be very confused very quickly.
Yeah, just another good example of why I think we're seeing so much interest in the AI for Writers Summit, because these kind of conversations can't wait for months or years to be had, and everyone is figuring it out at the same time or needs to
Yeah.
be. So, are you, ready for some rapid fire now? I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
we've
let's hit. I
covered
feel like
we've
just like,
covered a year's worth of content here.
yeah, I think we just like made people's week not so great because
Yeah, right, right.
riding the wave of all this excitement and it's like crashing down. So sorry if we're like the bummer in the party here, but I think it's important people are thinking about this. But yes, let's end with some other insanity in AI right now.
Well, first up, Microsoft had a different AI focused announcement. They laid off a key responsible AI team. So Microsoft laid off its entire ethics and society team within the artificial intelligence organization as part of recent layoffs that affected 10,000 employees across the company. What how did this make you feel about some of the compromises being made on AI ethics versus market conditions?
All I'll say is the arguments for the closed models are coming from OpenAI and Microsoft and Google, the same people who are laying off their ethics teams for being roadblocks to releasing what they're releasing. We have a problem as a society. The people that we are trusting to shepherd the closed models into our world are getting rid of the ethical teams that are supposed to make sure they're done safely. That's all I'll say on that.